Chris Smither grew up in New Orleans, found his mother's ukulele at an early age, and learned to play it with lessons from his uncle. From that moment, a star was born. Chris later received a guitar as a gift from his father at the age of 12. As a young adult, he traveled his way up the East Coast, playing gigs in Boston, often at the infamous Club 47. Here he befriended several musicians like Eric von Schmidt, Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, Pete Seeger, and Taj Mahal. He also performed at the historic Newport Folk Festival stage. Trying to summarize his accomplishments in a few words feels like a disservice, like describing Mother Theresa as a kind lady. In 2014, Signature Sounds released Link of Chain, a songwriter's tribute to Chris Smither, to celebrate Chris's 70th birthday and 50-year musical career. 10 years later, he's still performing, creating new music, and entertaining audiences all around.
Welcome, Chris Smither, to the show.
Thanks, Mark. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good.
I wanted to start off by talking about the Essential Western New England Songbook. It's an anthology of many of the best songs ever written and recorded by artists who have spent time living in Western New England. And it's put together by the New Music Alliance. You've been inducted twice, once for No Love for Sale, and secondly for Don't Call Me Stranger. So congratulations on your inductions.
Thank you.
Um, I wanted to talk briefly about No Love for Sale. I think it's an absolutely brilliant how you can take an everyday occurrence like seeing a man selling produce and weave it into a sad song about loneliness.
Well, that was an interesting tune, you know. That was No Love Today. It's actually called No Love Today, but everybody calls it No Love for
Oh,
Sale.
whoops. I wrote that down wrong.
About half the people call it that, you know, but it's, I used to have this, I mean, it's an actual person that was, you know, used to come down the street, you know, where I was growing up in New Orleans. But I remember writing the song because I was at my father uh, was living in a retirement community, a pretty nice one, down he'd moved from New Orleans to Chapel Hill, and I was down visiting him one time, and he stayed very involved and very active in sort of academic enterprises, and he was talking about a historian at Tulane that had sent him um, a whole thing about the New Orleans street vendors that he had done, and and he played it for me. It was a videotape, you know. So he played it for me, and this historian at some point did a sort of a weird, um, what I considered a weird imitation of what these guys would sound like. And I said, that's not what they sounded like. And my dad looked at me. He says, what? I said, no. Here's what they sounded like. And I turned off the TV that we were watching, and I just started singing the way the guy that used to come down our street used to sing. And and my dad said, well, you know, you're right. Uh, that's much closer to what he sounded like. And but the more I thought about it all afternoon, you know, and I was thinking, you know, that would make such a good song, you know, that whole. And so I started working on it, and my father had never seen me actually do what I do. You know,
Mhm.
he never, and let alone, you know, because usually but I was spending, you know, about a week there with him, and I think my mother had just died a couple of months before, and so we were spending a lot of time, my sister and I, with him, and so he was fascinated. You know, I would sit out on his back porch at his house and work on this tune, and he wouldn't come out to listen to what was going on. He paced around inside like an expectant parent. You know, it was it was very funny, and uh, it took me the better part of 2 days, you know, to come up with the sketch, you know, that became that song. And I said, "You want to hear this?" And he said, "Sure," you know. So I played it, and he said, "Oh, that's really nice," you know. I remember it was just it was an interesting interaction between me and my father, you know, that to see that come down. But you know, it really it's probably the most cinematic song I've ever written. You know, and I keep thinking to myself, it should be in a movie. You know, that's that whole thing. It should somebody should do that. I give them the song for free. You know, just to see it done. You know.
And Don't Call Me Stranger. It seems like a great bad boy song for, I think you wrote for your wife. There's
Yeah.
definitely a confident swagger about this song. It's a man's song and a song for the ladies to enjoy, I think.
Yeah. That one was that was pretty interesting. Yeah, I had just written. Um, I think I'd written. I don't know, a very sweet love song, or something. You know, and I asked my wife to. I said, "Come on up, I got something to play for you," and I played it for her, and she went, "Yeah," you know, kind of. Like, yeah, that's nice, you know. And I was a little miffed, you know. I said, "Why?" And then she looked at me and she said, "How come you never? I never get any bad boy songs anymore, you know, like Love You Like a Man or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Write me another one of those." And so I was a little reluctant to admit that I might no longer be a bad boy, you know. So I wrote.
Were you the bad boy back in the day? Back when you wrote Love You Like a
I
Man?
don't think so. I don't think so, you know. But then, you know, I'm probably not the best judge, you know.
I think one of the great attributes or about your career, you've been celebrating 50 years recently, celebrated 50 years in the business.
Mm.
And Signature Sounds released Link of Chain, a songwriter's tribute to Chris Smither. I think it's quite an honor when a group of artists contribute their time and performance to a tribute album after an artist has passed. But it seems like when they do it while the artist is still living, that's a very good, endearing
Yeah,
tribute.
as long as I don't think they're trying to usher me prematurely into
No.
the into the ground. No, I love that record, you know, and that was basically put together without my knowledge, you know. I didn't know anything really about it until just before it came out, and and I love it. You know, it's um I just love what was done with the songs for the most part. I mean, almost every single one of them is a revelation to me. And I've often said that, and other songwriters have said this as well, that the songs are like my children. You know, I sort of nurture them and bring them along and get them up to where they can cross the street by themselves and send them out in public, and then they go out and become their own thing. You know,
Mhm.
and it's just amazing to see them come back, you know, in different clothes. And you look at him and you say, Jesus, so what happened to you? Oh, that's right. You went off to school, then you met some other people, and I like your friends, you know, it's fun.
That is cool to see how some of the other artists interpret your songs and
Oh, yeah.
make it their own. Yeah.
And they find things in the song that you know I didn't even know were there. You know,
Hmm.
they make their own interpretations, which is you know, in a kind of a tribute in its own right. I mean, it means that you made something that can stand on its own. You know, so it doesn't require you to hold its hand.
Yeah. Uh, are there any collaborations that stand out for you the most or that you've enjoyed the most? Or are there any collaborations you would still like to do?
Um, I've often thought, you know, one of my favorite guitar players and songwriters is Martin Knopfler, and I've always thought it would be really nice just to sit down with him someday. You know, I'd love to do that. I find his selection of you know the topics that he writes about are endlessly fascinating, and I fancy that I see where some of them come from. You know, I think there was one that he wrote about a ship being driven up onto a beach for shipbreakers someplace in India,
Hmm.
and and I could I've seen the picture that inspired that song, I swear. I
Wow.
would love to meet him sometime and say, I know exactly where you got the idea for that song. And it's a wonderful song. But no, and I collaborate now, over the last two or three albums, I've collaborated a good bit with my producer, David Goodrich. We've been working together for so long that I mean, we sort of think like each other. And we just finished a new project, and you know he's got half the credit on three of the best songs on the album. It's he's one of these people who can get you out of a rut. I have a hard time sometimes starting on a new batch of songs, and
Mhm.
there's something about him and our relationship where he can just come into the room and say, "Here, do this, play this little riff," and I'll play it, and we'll just start working, and he just gets me going, and I it, it used to be songwriting for me used to be an extremely solitary occupation, and it was probably the most private thing that I did outside of a bedroom. It was one of those things that I just didn't want anybody else around.
Yeah.
It was, but uh, he's been invaluable to me. It's been one of my most cherished relationships over the last 20 years, 25, 30 years almost, I guess.
Wow. Songwriting seems to come so natural to you. In early on too. One of your first songs, "Devil Got Your Man,"
Yeah.
doesn't seem like something a young artist would be writing about.
I was trying to sound older than I was. I was I'm not surprised that you react like that, but it's, you know, I'm very much like Randy Newman. Randy Newman was asked one time if he enjoyed writing songs, and he said no. And he says, "I enjoy having written songs," and that's sort of the way I feel. Um, and once I get started, once the the magic starts to happen, then I do enjoy it in a way. And I mean, it's a little terrifying, but at the same time, the rewards are fantastic. It's just I feel so good when I finished a batch of songs. I'm in that mood right now. I mean, we just finished recording this new project, and I'm very pleased with the way everything came out. Um, uh, and every time I do that, every time I finish a project like that, I think to myself, you should just keep doing this, but I never do.
And you talk about the reaction. It's more than just the record sales or anything, but when you're performing and you see people in the audience humming along or singing along to the tune, is that more of a reaction that you're looking for?
Oh, I love it. Oh yeah, absolutely. Just to to realize that there's a whole bunch of people out there who've internalized what you did, and they, um, that's why I do it. I mean, really, I write the songs and I make the records so that I can go out and perform. I mean, I love what happens in a performance. I love the generation of that and the regeneration of that energy. The sort of communication between me and the artist, and you build something that is neither one of you, but it is of both of you. Um, and and then it goes away as soon as you quit. When it's over, it's over, and then you have to recreate it. The next time. That's what recreation's all about, right?
Yeah.
Recreation.
I can definitely tell that you have that connection with your audiences. It's very evident just watching your performances on video.
Um,
And during the pandemic, early on in the pandemic, when you weren't able to perform live in person, was it difficult for you? I saw you do some live streams. Was it difficult for you to do it performing that way?
I kind of dug it. It was. It's a little different, but it's not really. much different from what you and I are doing right now. You know,
Yeah.
it's um, or doing, you know, the probably hundreds of times that I've walked into a radio station and performed in the studio, just sort of little impromptu things, you know, and you know, you realize that you're playing for anywhere from hundreds to tens of thousands of people at once, and then you sort of get that in your head, you know. And during the pandemic, I loved it. You know, the streaming stuff was, and you know, you spent so much time locked up in your house and not going anywhere and not seeing anybody, and it was an excuse to put on some nicer clothes and comb your hair and
Yeah.
sit down sit down and present yourself to people, however distantly, you know. I enjoyed the opportunity.
And it must be nice if you get tired of going on tour and being away from home so much.
Yeah, well, you know, that has its appeal too, although the older I get, you know, I still love the performing, but the getting there is
Mm.
not as much fun as it used to be.
Is there anything that you would like to do or try before you hang up your hat?
Well, you know, I've got a song on the new record that ends with the with the lines, so, but look ahead now and tell me what you see. It's not so clear. And if you think like me, you'll simply take what comes and for patient. And that's about the way I feel, you know. I'll take it as it comes, you know. People, you know, no sooner had I finished this project than people around me were asking me, and I have no idea. You know, there was a time when I would have said, "Of course, I'm going to do another one," but I don't know. Yeah.
Part of that cut out, but I think we got what you were saying.
Oh,
It
okay.
seems like you're the kind of guy that would just keep performing it as long as you possibly can.
I think so. My wife says that's what I should do. For a long time, she kept saying, "Chris, you should think about taking it easy. You should keep it." And then suddenly, she just changed her mind. I think it was the pandemic because she saw that something happened to me. You know, like when I couldn't go out and do it. You know,
Mm.
and I don't think she cared for it that much. You know, and the change. And so she said, "I think you should just keep doing it as long as you can."
Some people just deteriorate once they stop,
Yeah.
or once they retire and don't go to work. They seem to deteriorate.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a common thing, but I never thought of myself as that kind of person because I do have a lot of interests, you know, but it's I guess I can see a vegetative state coming on. You know, something I try to avoid, but it's,
You mentioned the new album coming up. Is that coming out in April?
I think so. And it's either end of April or beginning of May, sometime in there. And it's called All About the Bones. Not to
All
get too
about the
morbid.
bones.
All About the Bones. That's the title song and the title of the album. Yeah, and it's I'm quite pleased with it. I'm anxious for people to hear it.
Are you working with anybody new? I think on the last one you worked with Matthew Lorenz and
Matt Lorenz, yes, he was a wonderful addition to that. No, he's not on this one, but we do have Betty Sue. She's a Texas singer in Austin. She does she's on the record. Does a lot of very intimate and at the same time almost ghostly vocal harmonies. Um, and she's a wonderful accordion stylist. I mean, you know, and it almost sounds at times like there's an organ, you know, doing these little touches all through. You know, I loved her before she came to work, and then when we finished, by the time we finished doing the record, I was so I was much more impressed with her than I was in the beginning, which is always nice to find out. And
mm,
then we on four of the tunes we have Chris Cheek, who is an astronomically good saxophone player, jazz
Wow.
man, one of the foremost sax players in the world, actually, who happened to be a friend of David Goodrich's. And he said, come on in and tootle away here. And the results were staggering, I mean, in my opinion. It was just,
Good.
and then and Zach Trajano is playing percussion and does a wonderful job. He's like a third generation drummer, but he's one of these drummers who decided he wanted to be a songwriter and a guitar player, and so he hadn't been playing that many drums, but he got back into it right away, and he just did such a solid job. You know,
Wow.
it's great. And he actually played drums on my album. Let's see, what was it called? Time Stand Still. He was the drummer on Time Stand Still, that album, and so he sort of came back in and altogether, you know, the whole album only took us 5 days to get down. You know,
Wow.
and it was a joy to work with all those people.
It seems like most of the time that I've listened to your music, it's been your live performances, and
Yeah.
where it's usually just you and the guitar.
Uh,
And I sometimes have to like think back, oh, I should probably go listen to the album as well and hear that version. And it's great hearing the slightly contrasting sometimes because you have additional instruments, like you were saying, you've got the accordion in this new one.
yeah, you know, I don't think there's nothing that jumps out at you as being totally different from the
Mm.
live performance, other than the saxophone. You know, and yet it just somehow just seems appropriate. You know, basically, you know, Goody's the producer, and his whole approach to it is to make me the center. He says, you know, and he's always telling the other musicians, the show is about him. It ain't about you. You know, you're supposed to be accenting what he's doing. And they do, you know, they truly do.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't stand out where you're definitely the focus of attention. So, what was the name of the album again?
All about the bones.
All About the Bones. Definitely looking forward to that. And you're going to be performing at the Packing House in Willington, Connecticut, coming up on February 10th.
Right.
Have you performed there before?
I don't think so. You know, I'm pretty sure I haven't, but
It's a great venue. I think you'll definitely enjoy. The acoustics are good, and you'll have a good sized audience there as well.
oh, great. Super.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
No problem, Mark. It's good to see you.